here that you know, we are social, and I would agree in some part that we are social animals, and like June said and I said before, that in a libertarian perspective is that that it is through voluntary action that we can act on that. And I could also make the case that along with being social animals, human beings are also naturally pursue independent self-interest. You know, not, you know, people just going to say, oh, you know, the businessman or, you know, the greedy CEO. But, you know, every individual here pursues his or her own self-interest. You know, every human being does this. You don't think politicians do? You don't think there are socialist theorists that don't?
But not 100% of the time. It's that time where we pursue common interest.
Can I comment on that? That's definitely not true. Not every individual acts in their own self-interest. And the number one example is a mother.
I think there's a couple of points that have been raised. First of all, the overwhelming majority of human history, which was tribal history, was people produced stuff what they needed collectively. And when the means of production were developed beyond a certain point, basically when agriculture and domestication of animals was introduced, that's when class society, which is a tiny minority as far as the tiny portion, as far as the total human history, that's when class society was developed. And in response to this issue of collectivization, obviously, if you're developing agriculture on the basis of a horse and plow, there's not the basis, the material basis for collectivization. When you have the giant combines and so on, and farming of thousands of acres and so on that you have today, then you have the basis for collectivization. In other words, as the means of production are developed, a different form of organizing production flows naturally from that. And it has nothing to do with any kind of fantasies about what's biological, inherently biological about the human species.
Tyler didn't leave in disgust. He had to go to work. So, look, we're almost out of time, and this is a problem. Here's the problem. We have we had 1, 2, 3, 4 people deep with questions, and we're not going to be able to get to all 4 of them.
My point was expressed.
Okay. So that's what I was just going to ask. Before we go to concluding remarks, and we're going to have to keep concluding remarks to only about 2-3 minutes because we're going to run out of time, but we want everybody to have, I don't know if there's such thing as closure, but we want to have, this is an introduction and an ongoing discussion. So who has a real burning question that they think just has not been touched upon or dealt with at all? Seriously.
Whose question is this?
These two had their hands up before, so go ahead. You two go ahead and do your questions, and we have to go to conclusion.
Okay, to Chu, I wanted to just...
Into the mic.
Oh. Okay, to Chu, I just wanted to ask, you were putting all this emphasis on the protection of private ownership, but that only makes sense if, because stealing is only a result of framing everything in terms of, you know, abstract concepts of ownership, like, oh, this is my land, I own this land, it's mine. And, you know, the reason the Indians didn't, you know, the reason they didn't starve to death and whatnot was because they didn't have a concept of ownership to begin with. So, this argument that without incentive, people will not have no reason to work is fundamentally flawed because, you know, we have this dogma that labor is rewarded. Sorry. Because, you know, we're like dogs, you know, begging for treats because, you know, these awards that are distributed for our labor is still controlled by the elites. So I think that it's important that this paradigm first be changed because you need to realize that we don't, you know, you don't need your scraps to work because there's other more important reasons to do labor other than for petty incentive provided by your employer.
Right. You.
Anybody? Quick remark?
Yeah, quick quick remark about that. Just the idea of property in general. I mean, people will have to work just to survive. That's the idea of capitalism. It's incentive to, you have to survive. Everyone has to work themselves to actually make a living and survive, and that's the idea behind that. Property rights, it's an interesting issue. I mean, a lot of libertarians go back to the idea of homesteading, the idea that, we're equal amongst each other, so maybe start with the idea of homesteading. It's the idea that, if you're using the land to produce, that gives you a greater right. So that's, that it trends towards that idea, libertarianism. But property rights is an interesting issue. I mean, people can study that. And also, that's fine. That's all.
I think you made a very good point about incentive to work under capitalism. Look, under his fairy tale story of what capitalism is, then the working class, which is the producing class, they should have most of the wealth. They should have most of the value accrued to them. But what happens? The people who produce in society make the least amount of money, have the least amount of wealth, have the least amount of political power in society. And the class in society which simply extracts the surplus value, that is the bourgeoisie, that is the owning class in society, they're the ones who get all the value that's made off of the producing class. What he's telling you about, well, each person creates and then they get back this equal amount and it creates this incentive to work, that's a fairy tale. It doesn't exist in reality. Does it exist in your lives? I don't think so.
Just a quick comment. I just think that this kind of system existed throughout the beginning of time. So I mean, I mean this whole system. But anyways.
Good. Two questions. Make them very brief because we're almost out of time. So go ahead.
Okay. Hey, I'm Lars. I think my question has pretty good timing. Through the conference, I've had the desire to limit the board member response to one per audience question. And I wanted to know, given that desire, through your perspective, how would you go about bringing that change?
What's that? What do you mean, what change?
If you, given that desire, like say you had my desire for that to be the structure of the conference, how would you go about bringing that change right now? Yeah.
Can I go first? You'd have to come to the meeting and raise it at the general meeting before the conference happened.
That was the one response.
Alrighty, let's look at socialism here. You got a widget factory, right? And you got all these people making widgets. I didn't see the first part of this, so maybe I don't understand socialism. But you have to have supervisors, do you not?
No.
Somebody's got to watch the workers. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. People just, there's bills to pay, there's resources that you have to collect to make the widgets, there's logistic concerns, there's safety concerns in the factory. Somebody has to be in charge. So do those people make the same money as the people making the widgets when they have a lot more responsibility? It would take an amount of education to put them at that level. Okay. Now, on top of that, who watches the guys that are the supervisors? So you have a government, do you not? Okay, so do those people make the same amount as the people that are making widgets? And if they do, what is their incentive to get the education experience to work in the government? And then who, I'm not talking to you, and then who watches the government? Okay, so what you end up with is an experiment like the Soviet Union. Okay, so please explain to me how that's supposed to work better than capitalism.
So go ahead, each of you have 1 minute to answer that question, and then you're going to have 2 minutes to wrap it up. Or if you think you can wrap your conclusion up into the answer, that